Hi there. I'm so excited to welcome you to the Arthritis Life podcast, where we share arthritis life stories and tips for thriving with autoimmune arthritis. My name is Cheryl Crow, and I am passionate about helping people navigate real life with arthritis beyond joint pain. I've been living with rheumatoid arthritis for 20 years, and I'm also a mom, occupational therapist, video creator, support group leader, and I created the Room to Thrive self-management program. I am so excited to help you live a more empowered life with arthritis. We're going to cover everything from kitchen life hacks to navigating the healthcare system to coping with friends who just don't get it. Seriously, no topic is going to be off limits on this podcast. My interviewees and I share our honest stories of how chronic illness affects our lives. This includes discussions about mental health, sex, shame, pregnancy, body image, advocacy, self-acceptance, and so much more. You'll hear stories from all ends of the spectrum, from a person who's living in medicated remission from psoriatic arthritis to somebody living with severe mobility restrictions and severe pain from rheumatoid arthritis. You'll hear how people manage their conditions in different ways, like medications, mindfulness, movement, social support, work accommodations, and so much more. You'll also hear from rheumatology experts who just get it. We'll dive deep into the science behind chronic pain and what's the latest evidence for lifestyle changes that can help you thrive with arthritis, including exercise, sleep, nutrition, stress reduction, and more. This is your chance to sit down and chat with a friend who's been there. Ready to figure out how to manage your arthritis life? Let's get started. Hi, I'm so excited today to have Dr. Saimun Singla back on the Arthritis Life podcast for the second time, but the first time in the last 3 years. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, it's so great to be able to catch up. A lot has changed in both of our lives since we last talked. But first, for those who maybe didn't hear your earlier episode 72, can you let the listeners know, where do you live and what is your relationship to arthritis?
So my name is Dr. Saimun Singla, and I am a pediatric rheumatologist and then became a patient with rheumatoid arthritis and then became, again, board certified in something called integrative medicine. So in that order. And so my journey with arthritis is not because I see patients with arthritis or autoimmune conditions. It's because I have RA myself or got RA after becoming a full-fledged rheumatologist. So when you become kind of the patient, everything turns and flips and your perspective of the disease changes, obviously. So through that journey, obviously I had the medical knowledge going in, but from the patient standpoint, I realized there were so many gaps in care or knowledge that was evidence-based, which is kind of why I ended up doing the integrative medicine fellowship to figure out, okay, well, what do arthritis patients or patients with autoimmune conditions, what are they supposed to eat? Why is sleep even important? Are there things that we can do for pain control other than just medication? So all these real life questions started popping up, and now I've kind of pivoted my career. I went from full-blown academia to now full-blown private practice, where I blend kind of the clinical world, the evidence-based stuff that I've done day in and day out with more complementary things to kind of help your symptoms and, as you know, just manage the overall illness for the long haul.
Yeah, that's just, your story is very unique. For people who don't know, there's only about 350 board certified pediatric rheumatologists in the entire United States to begin with. So you're like a unicorn just to start off. And then to get diagnosed after already becoming one, it's just such a rare mixture. And I think it's such a powerful story that, and a testament to the fact that you can have all the medical knowledge in the world, but when it happens to you, it's a whole different thing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's as if all the medical knowledge goes out the window, actually.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people have had that experience. If they're, a healthcare provider and then maybe someone in their family gets sick or they get sick, you suddenly see things through a new lens. And I just want to quickly state or review the fact that you got diagnosed postpartum after the birth of your second child, because there's a lot of people who contact me through social media, and I'm sure you too, and, want to know, like, how do I manage having small kids? Now you have 3 kids.
Yes.
What are some, sorry, this wasn't one I prepared you for, but
It's okay.
before we go on to the topic of the day is really going to be, we're going to dive more into dietary changes and how people can do diet. What are some myths versus fact about nutrition and RA? But just something unique about your story that I would love to hear, honestly, as a mom myself too, is what are some of the things that have helped you balance being a mom and with managing your rheumatoid arthritis?
Yeah. That is a tricky question. And I think that's been a learning curve for me because the stages and ages of the children is kind of what dictates how active you need to be, how much they understand about your diagnosis. So for me, it's really, they all know I have arthritis. They see me take my medications. My daughter did like a juvenile arthritis awareness thing at school once for one of her projects. I think it's a family affair for us. So my husband is very involved. I think it was a learning curve for us too. Okay, well, we're starting this medication. All the symptoms should go away, right? Everything's going to be fixed. And then you very quickly realize that like this diagnosis is like an attachment to you. It's not going anywhere. So we have got to nurture it. We've got to include it as part of our family. So sometimes that means not going out when everybody else is going out to eat or going for family events or birthday parties or me taking a step back and be like, I just want to rest. And the kids are okay with that. They're like, okay, mommy needs a rest so that when we come back, we can hang out with her. So it's been never once have they been like, well, why is mommy always saying no? Or why is mommy? It's always been us educating them at whatever stage of life they're in. And then me trying to be present when they actually are with me.
I love that. I think that I relate to that as well. I've really had to learn to advocate for my need to rest, and which is hard for me because I'm at baseline the kind of person that wants to say yes to everything. That you can relate to that too, just because I know you a little bit. And we're multi-passionate, but there really is a point where you have to just recognize that your basic needs matter. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever met her, Dr. Christine Stamatos. She's a nurse practitioner who has her own like fibromyalgia clinic. She was a past Association of Rheumatology Professionals president, but she's a great advocate for patients. And she said, I tell my patients, think of your bed as your recharging station, like for yourself. Like you don't just, it's not just a nice to have to recharge it. Like you have to charge it.
Yes. So, because otherwise you're going to find out very quickly that you are not full of endless energy.
Yeah. Yes. Nothing like becoming a mom or a parent to humble you. And I think it's so good for kids to learn. I have the same thing. My child has learned that, mom needs rest. And that's just, we tend to have a lot of like emotional loading around like guilt. And for kids, they just kind of take it. If you present it to them as like a fact of life,
it's like, it is what it is.
Yeah.
For them. We do a lot of stuff that doesn't require a lot of running around. So like puzzles, Jenga, board games, drawing, painting together. We'll do stuff where I'm like still spending quality time with them, but I'm not running around all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of kids, there's so many arts and crafts and things that kids love to do. And yeah, those are some great pro tips. Advocate for your need to rest, find fun activities that you can do that are not expending a lot of physical energy. Right. And as you said, pivoting as your kids go through different stages and ages, because you're right, like the fine motor demands are so high when the kid's like a baby or toddler, and it's as they get older, like my son's 11, it's a lot less fine motor now, but it's almost more like emotional, like getting ready for the preteen years. And yeah. But thank you for the moment talking about that. But you recently created a really great course for people to learn more about one of the most complicated topics, I think, in all of what's called self-management. Self-management is like the skills you need on a daily basis to manage your condition, whether that's exercise, pain management tools, lifestyle, nutrition. We're going to talk about nutrition because that's the one that tends to be complex and confusing. So I guess first, why did you create this course?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I have zero intention prior to this of creating any courses. I'm like, I have enough on my plate. I don't want to figure out how to upload a video onto a teaching platform.
Right.
But the reason that I switched my mind is because now that I've been doing my private practice for 3 years, the most common question that I get when it comes to not just arthritis, but any autoimmune condition is, what am I supposed to be eating? Is there anything that I'm supposed to be eating that can help me get rid of the disease? Can it help me reverse the disease? Can it help me control my symptoms? So many different questions, all the same version of the question. And I ended up kind of finding myself repeating the same stuff over and over again. And mind you, I have training in integrative medicine. So there was like a whole 3 months dedicated to just diet, learning about the different types of diet for different types of conditions. And so what I was thinking is, you know what, instead of repeating myself, and also so people don't have to come here to see me just for a visit, one-on-one visit, this is knowledge that anyone with arthritis that's interested in learning about this can have access to. So that was kind of the driving factor behind it, because what I've realized is there's tons of myths out there just from anecdotal experience, meaning people's own experience of, well, I ate this and this is what happened to me. Now everybody should do it. And I'm like, that's not true. Because sometimes I'm like cringing on the other side of the camera, the screen. And I'm like, that's not true. Or I've tried that and that did not happen to me, but they say it so matter of factly that you're very compelled to be like, well, I'm going to do it too. So that was kind of the birth of the course.
I'm grateful to anyone who tackles this topic. I do have a self-paced course that's really like overall, I call it like the orientation manual for having rheumatic disease or inflammatory arthritis. And when I first made the course in 2020, I actually said, I'm not going to touch diet because it's too complicated and to summarize. And I feel strongly that people should work with an expert like a registered dietitian or get the highest quality guidance from somebody who specializes in this. But then I realized, because I was doing a disservice by not including it, because it is so many people's first question. And there are some general rules of thumb. So anyway, I'm always like so grateful to people who really dig deep. Mine's more of a overview, right? A basic true beginner's guide. But you're giving in this course more depth of detail, right? And more truly like deeper understanding of why do some of these myths persist, because there's oftentimes a tiny kernel of truth, but it's taken like 20 steps far.
Right. And I think at the end of the day, if you think about it, what we eat, we make that decision 3 times a day times 365 days a year. That's over 1,000 times that you're having to think about the same darn question over and over again. So it's the medication part is almost easy. It's, oh yeah, I take this medicine on this day, or I take it daily. But then the food part is still lingering. You're like, well, no one's told me what I should be doing about that. And the reality is there's not one right answer. We know that. Otherwise, we'd all be doing it. We'd all be eating the same stuff to get rid of the disease. But the reality is it needs to make sense for your life, your taste buds, your culture. You might not enjoy the same types of sandwiches, curries that other people enjoy. So it really needs to be fine-tuned. And I think because there is so many moving parts to it, and that's where that analysis paralysis comes in. You're like, oh, it almost feels better to keep reading about it than actually taking action on it and doing it.
So true. That's why everyone ends up with like 30 tabs open. And now with ChatGPT, you can use that, but then that can confuse you even more. So yeah, let's go through some of the maybe myths versus facts. I think a lot of these come down to, or a lot of these involve a amorphous or an unclearly defined terms. So maybe what do people mean when they say inflammatory foods or anti-inflammatory? Can you help unpack?
Yes, because when a rheumatologist hears the word inflammation, it's your immune system doing something specific to either get rid of an infection, right, fight off something, or in the case of an autoimmune disease, it's your immune system has gone rogue and now it's inappropriately causing too much inflammation and attacking a certain area when it shouldn't be. Some of that is measurable through lab work. Some of it is not measurable. So you see where the confusion lies. It's, well, how do you know I don't have inflammation, even if my labs are normal? It's not something we say, oh, you have inflammation, you don't. We define inflammation as you have this diagnosis. The underlying cause of it is because your immune system is doing inappropriate things like creating too much inflammation at the level of the joint or the organ or whatever. And so when someone says inflammatory foods, is it really that you're eating certain foods and it's kind of making that process a whole lot worse? Or is it that there is some component of the food that maybe might not be serving you in the long run if you're eating it for prolonged amounts of time? I think That's where the switch needs to happen of what's actually happening versus what you think is happening. Because we have all eaten inflammatory foods, right? Processed foods, sugary foods, all those things that we are not good for us that we know, right?
Right.
But is that really going to be the reason why I can't get off my medication? Or is that why I'm having to start a medication or why I have arthritis to begin with? Not necessarily. I think the way I think about it is your diet is going to do two things. Yes, it can definitely kind of simmer that, help calm that inflammation down, some more for some people than others, okay? But the bigger kind of game plan here is that it's going to decrease your risk of things that are going to kill you, your mortality risks of heart
Mhm.
disease, strokes, heart failure, all those things, because your heart is your main organ, right? Like your number one reason for dying is going to be cardiovascular disease. All right. And so if what you're putting in your mouth can decrease the risk of those bad things happening, then that's my number one takeaway. Hey, let's at least focus on that part. Now, as you know, when you have an inflammatory condition, like an autoimmune condition, your risk of heart disease is higher.
Most people don't know that. I
No.
never was taught that. I just learned it Googling.
No, it's true.
That
And I learned that in the integrative medicine fellowship. And I was like, oh my God, I was so scared when I read that. I was like, I have all the check marks to get to lead up to heart disease. And I don't want that in my 50s. I want to see my kids graduate. I want to see them get married and have grandchildren, you know? So for me, I'm like, okay, that's my motivation. What do I need to do to decrease that risk? Part of it is making sure your inflammation is under control. And that can be with the traditional medications. And there's nothing wrong in having to take your Orencia or Cimzia or methotrexate, whatever it is that you need to keep that inflammation under control. The second layer, now we're getting more sophisticated, is the lifestyle stuff, is if you really want to nourish your body, you really need to focus on certain groups of food. What I like to do is focusing on what you're supposed to be putting in your mouth, not what you're supposed to be kind of supposedly getting rid of, right? And so that's where the myth is, eat this, not this, eat this, not this. It's
Well, and I was just gonna add, follow a really great. He's not, I guess, not necessarily a registered dietitian. He has a PhD
Mm,
in nutrition, and he said there's no such thing as an inflammatory food. That's across the board, always going to be completely inflammatory to everyone. There's just different
right.
people's. I don't know if you agree with that, but he was. I
Yeah.
think he might have been saying it to the extreme. I mean, like I think there are things like additives. Like there's not like some person out there who's wow, highly processed food is just not inflammatory at all to me. What he's trying to
Lies. Yeah.
say is like dairy is a great example. If you are sensitive to dairy, eating dairy is going to be inflammatory
Right.
potentially. Whereas if you're not, dairy's great. Like you can't, there's no one size fit all. So sorry, that just
Yeah.
reminded
Yeah.
me of that when you were
No,
saying,
these are like tomatoes, potatoes, like
yeah.
call it what you want, but in the long run, we know it's not serving us to eat certain types of food. And those are very specific foods that are like no-brainers. I'm not talking about like the gluten, the dairy, the stuff that pops up on your allergy sensitivity testing. I'm talking about processed foods, high sugar content stuff that's not going to serve anybody, regardless of what
Mhm.
condition you have. So those foods, I wouldn't necessarily say they're inflammatory. I think let's just say they're not good for us.
I'm
Period.
sorry. I'm like, I really love this reframe because I think the reason I've had this sometimes complicated relationship with this topic of nutrition is
Mm,
that I've seen so many people get led astray down
yeah.
like a path of unnecessarily restricted diets. Or I think the worst is when they withhold medication because they're putting all their hopes on diet. And I think,
Yes.
but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Just
Right.
because diet, for the severity of my RA when I was diagnosed, it was like, you're not this, we need medication.
Mhm.
This is not a optional thing. And I also am going to be benefit even if I'm never gonna get off of my biologics or methotrexate or even titrate down. This is going to help my overall health.
Yes.
To have good
Yes.
heart health, there's no downside of
Right.
it. So
Right.
let's keep it simple. Like whether or not it affects my RA on any measurable, like I don't feel my joints maybe don't feel like they get
Sure.
sore when I have a certain food, but I'm going to eat it because I'm investing in my health. And that's
Right.
like a beautiful thing.
And that's where the mindset needs to happen. I don't need to have the perfect foods in front of me. I don't need to have the perfect plate. You have kind of a combo of things that you know are going to serve you in the long run, regardless of if you're on medicine or not. Because I have seen the extreme come into my clinic where they have been on a diet for way too long. So if it's in the case of a child, they are not growing properly, right? They're
Oh, dear.
skinny, they're a failure to thrive at a certain age is what we call it. Their joints are contracted, flexed, like it is hard to look at that and say, I could have helped you. We're in 20 something, right? Beyond, we have medications to help you get through this. And I wish someone had not given you so much false hope in being able to put all your eggs in one basket and say, hey, I'm going to eliminate this and only eat this and see what happens. Maybe for some people, they're allergic to certain foods. They need to be removing certain things from the diet. But that's where that's like the gray area where really you need to be working with a professional one-on-one to figure out what that is. But for the majority of people, what I notice is that food is not going to move the needle in your big RA picture or juvenile arthritis picture. It's just an added component where it's, hey, do this now so your future self will look back and be like, thank you. I don't have to worry about high calcium score on my CT of my heart, Like these are things that we don't think about now, but we should start to talk about. I also don't want people to have fear of foods because it's like, someone told me on the internet that potatoes were so bad for you, so I'm not eating it. We don't want that mentality going in as well.
Yeah. And when I had initially, I chimed in on my idea of no food being 100% inflammatory, anti-inflammatory. You were saying about nourishing, which I just want to,
Yes.
I want to underline that point because I say the same thing to my support groups is, if you're not sure where to start, starting with when you're looking at making different choices around diet and nutrition, thinking about what can I add? Can I add in some blueberries? Can I add something in to nourish my body versus what are all the bad, horrible foods that I'm going to be a failure of a patient if I eat these fruits.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Anytime you go to the extreme, it's almost like you're setting yourself up for failure, or if not right away, at least in the next couple of months, because it's not sustainable to be super restrictive. If you have celiac and you need to be off of gluten, completely different story. Like that is a part of the acceptance game of knowing like, I can't eat gluten. So we're going to have to, figure that out. But if you don't have celiac or some sort of sensitivity to gluten, don't feel bad for eating bread or having pasta. It's like you have to be able to enjoy your life, and it comes down to portions as well. Like how much of it are you eating on a week-to-week basis? Is it actually doing any harm or is it hurting you? Where are we with this?
I love that. And so we've talked about inflammation and, anti-inflammatory versus inflammatory, potentially, clarifying that distinction. What about trigger foods? What does it mean to have a trigger food and why can that be helpful?
Yeah, trigger food. So a trigger in general, when you have RA, is going to be something that makes you, if not you have a flare, but at least make your joints feel a little bit achier the next day, or you feel more tired the next day, or your stomach is hurting, or you're having diarrhea, something more obvious related to a food. But sometimes at the beginning, when you don't know what to look for or what you're supposed to be looking for, you're like, I think I'm okay eating this. So it's a matter of knowing, do your joints feel different when you eat this food? Now, when we're talking about tracking down a trigger, that's where it gets tricky because obviously we're eating multiple types of foods in a day. We're doing multiple things, taking different medications, right? So that's when I track kind of specific triggers, I break it down into the 4 pillars, which is going to be, what did I eat the day before? Was I overexerting myself? What type of physical activity was I doing? How was my sleep? What was my stress? Like, what's my current milieu of stress right now? So when you're like, okay, this variable are still, the only thing that's changed is this, it's almost like an experiment. You're able to figure out like, okay, I think I was triggered by this food. So keep it going. So if you eat that again the next time you eat, do you notice that same trend? Now, if you want to be extra sophisticated, you'll say, okay, if bread, let's say gluten is a thing, let me eliminate it for 2 weeks and then reintroduce it on week 3. What are my joints doing? How am I feeling? That's the only way we're going to know. It's not going to be a lab test that tells you that, oh my gosh, Cheryl, you need to, how dare you eat sweet potatoes or, this or that. Like it needs to be fine-tuned to what's happening in real time in your joints.
I love that. And I think, it's like really what you learn in high school, right? Of like the scientific method.
Right.
Just, I think where the overwhelm comes in, if you're listening to this, be like, it's not that simple in your head.
Right.
Because it's so hard sometimes to hold variables steady and only change one thing. I will say if it's a strong trigger, you will figure it out. Like for me, one of the biggest triggers I've discovered, first is lack of sleep. That one's a little easier because it's like you're either sleeping or you're
right.
And then, I don't know, maybe I have lupus too. I don't know, but it's sun sensitivity and light sensitivity,
Mhm.
or sorry, heat sensitivity and sun sensitivity separate and together. So my fatigue flares up horribly if I'm in the sun or heat for too long, but worse together. So when you figure those things out, you're like, oh yeah, it's so extreme that
Mhm.
I'm making this, A to B connection. With some of
Right.
the smaller triggers, it just will take a little longer. I'm just giving some
No,
words of encouragement.
absolutely. We've all been there. I had no idea. For me, like, red wine was a trigger. I'm like, you don't put two and two together until you're like on year 2 of diagnosis. You're like, every time I drink this, I just wake up feeling achy or hurting. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I think it's what I drink. And so unless someone teaches you to blatantly look for this pattern, how do you know? You don't know what you don't know. So
Right.
for anyone who's newly diagnosed, do not feel bad if you don't know your triggers. I'm sure there's tons of triggers I don't know of yet as well, because I don't know about them. And
Right. They
so,
can change over time
well, they
too.
can change over time. Exactly. So if I'm having, the biggest thing is looking in hindsight and saying, okay, if I'm feeling like this today, what did I do? What did I eat? What was I around that may have added to this? And you might not know the answer right away. This is why everything in rheumatology land is sometimes trial and error. Did the medicine work? Okay, great. We'll continue. If it didn't, we pivot. So you have to have, that's the one part of medicine that's the hardest to deal with, is the gray area, or what you call the
Right.
art of medicine, right? Where you can do it in 10 different ways to tackle one problem. And so it can be overwhelming for the doctor. It can be overwhelming for the patient to figure out what's up, what's down. But as long as you know going in, I'm going to try to figure out a trigger. I'm going to try to figure out if this food is what my body needs or should be eating. That's all that matters, is that effort.
Yeah, 100%. And the other kind of, I'm thinking like, let's see, defining terms here. I
Mhm.
wrote down a few other things other than, inflammatory, anti-inflammatory, trigger foods, and then gut health. That seems to be
Mhm.
such a buzzword, and even just more in the
I
3 years since we last chatted. Why is everyone talking about gut health
Gosh.
days? Yeah.
First of all, the gut is in the medical world, it's not just your stomach. It's
Mhm.
everything from your mouth all the way. So track it down. It's going to be your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, your large intestine, all of it, because all of it needs to work together for you to be able to absorb food properly. The things that are going to be harmful for your gut, right, in this setting, from what I just defined, is processed food, sugar foods, things that we know are no-nos, are not going to help us. They're not going to help those cells be optimized and work the way they're supposed to work. And so a lot of this comes from research looking at the gut microbiome. That's like the newest, sexiest term, right? Is what is the gut microbiome doing? Because in reality, if you look at it, we are more bacterial cells, viral cells, yeast than we are human cells. And that's
That
evolution.
freaks me
I
out.
know.
Sorry.
Which
Knowledge is
is what
power. It's also sometimes scary.
But it's evolution, right? Like, we are obviously, as human cells, more sophisticated than the bacterial cells, but they were here before us, and we have what we call a symbiotic relationship with them. So if we keep them happy, if you scratch my back, I scratch your back type of relationship with them, right? So if we can optimize the gut and keep that gut microbiome happy and have the systems performing as they should, then that's another outlet to feel better. That's another avenue for us to feel better. And so all of that is summarized in the term gut health. But a lot
Yes.
of people fixate on one part of the gut, unfortunately, instead of looking at it as a whole. Well, okay, well, how can I optimize all parts of it, from brushing my teeth properly, drinking enough water, right? Even, and like, water is important for the large intestine as well. Eating fiber, things like that, is, we're talking about all these things together, not just you should only eat fiber and forget about the rest of the picture.
Yeah, I think, one of the visuals I imagine, let me know if this is correct, because my brain's very visual. I'm not,
Yeah.
but I'm not really wanting to visualize exactly what's happening in my colon. No, but I think about the kind of like when you go to the dentist when you're a kid, or when you take your kid to the dentist and they say, "Oh, you have to like brush like the
Yeah.
sugar bugs off of your teeth." I think about that, like that the sugar or the highly processed food, which again, I have those things in moderation every day because I just know moderation works for me.
Yeah.
But I'm not having them in excess, because what I imagine is that's feeding quote unquote bad. There's the gut microbiome, the microbiome stuff, the whatever we call it, the
Yeah.
whatever you just call it, the good bugs and
Yes.
the not so helpful bugs. And we want
Right.
to, as far as my dietitian, I feel like I'm not doing her good, not, I'm doing her disservice by explaining this wrong, I think maybe, but you let me know if this is right. That it's like you want to be feeding the most
Mhm.
helpful ones that are in the right spot and not feeding the ones that are on,
Right.
or
You
that
want to
cause
kind of
bloating.
drown those people out, because what happens is if the ratio flips where the bad is over the good, then you have what we call dysbiosis, where
Yes, which
now
I've
there's
had.
and some people take it to the extreme and say everybody has dysbiosis, or you should be on this type of cleanse to get rid of your dysbiosis. It takes time for good things to grow and bad things to go away. It's not going to be an overnight, sensation. I think the biggest thing that moves the needle for most people when it comes to dysbiosis and gut health is getting rid of the crap that's probably not helping you. And then that's step one, right? And then the second part is adding in more of the things that's nourishing you. So fruits, veggies, think fiber for the gut. Because we as humans cannot break down fiber. We rely on those little bacteria to break it down. When they break down the fiber, they release metabolites that then go on to be helpful to us. So obviously we want to keep them happy, keeps our body happy, keeps
Mhm.
us feeling good. When you'll notice probably when you eat too much of a not great thing, right? Like you're constantly eating out, eating fast food, you might feel sluggish, or you might feel like, gosh, the food is just sitting there. It's not moving like the way it's
Mm.
like a vegetable or a smoothie would kind of move through you. For a reason, your metabolism's going to change. Peristalsis, which is like the rate the stomach kind of moves food, is going to change. There's subtle things happening. And just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening, right? And so what we do know is that when you nourish your body with more anti-inflammatory type foods, meaning the not processed stuff, the stuff that will help us flourish from a system standpoint, like stuff happening at a microscopic level, then we know that all systems are go. At least we have that part optimized. You're doing what you can in your power without having to take medications to do what you need to do. Now, for some people, that might not be enough. You might be maxed out in eating healthy and trying to get rid of processed food, or, for the most part, you're doing well. But you might still need to be on medication, even if you are doing everything you can. And I think that's where people get stuck is, well, I'm doing everything I can. I'm not going out to eat. That's the reality for the majority of us with an autoimmune condition, is that unfortunately we have to do every single little check box there is to live our best life.
Yeah, and I think I want to unpack that more if it's okay with you. You have such a unique perspective because you're treating such a variety of patients
So,
that
yeah.
you get people. I mean, it is a little bit of a self-selected population that comes through your door and that they're looking for like an integrative or, but you're also like you have experience in other settings. And I think the thing that people are missing when they're like in this echo chamber on social media is they keep hearing the same kinds of stories over and over again. Oh, this person reversed their RA, they cured it, they healed it. When those are typically represent, this is my understanding. Obviously, I can't prove it because there aren't any studies I'm aware of on this. But from a lot of experts I've talked to, I'm curious your opinion. A lot of experts I've asked, why are there some people? I don't think they're not all lying, right? Some people are
Right.
snake oil salesmen, but there
Right.
are genuinely like patients who are like, I really made this dietary change and it was very quick that I had this relief. Like the experts I've talked to have said either that person potentially could have been misdiagnosed and they had reactive arthritis, which is like a short-term condition
Sure.
anyway, and it was destined to go away. They were just destined to go into spontaneous remission and they
Yes.
could have changed their diet, or they
Yes.
had more mild disease. What do you Okay, are you agreeing with all that?
I 100% agree, and that's been my experience in clinic. I haven't written this up, or there are no randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials on this. But what I've noticed and observed from years of doing this is that there is a small subset of patients where if they control diet, things somehow go into remission. And I'm not going to be the one to say, no way, no how, that's not true. I have witnessed that. But I will say that is a minority of cases where the disease was already kind of minor to begin with. So when I say not as severe, let's say, so you don't have diffuse joint involvement, your inflammatory markers aren't through the roof, your rheumatoid factor CCP are negative, so you have a milder course. Yes, it could be reactive, definitely. Or you might just be that lucky person who went into remission from getting rid of stuff that wasn't serving your body. And I'm not going to say, no, that's not possible. I've seen it. But the majority, when I say majority, I'm talking 70, 80%. So out of every 10 people that come in, maybe 2 at most will have the remission just with diet control. Majority of everybody else is going to have to do a little bit of everything to keep it under control.
Yeah, and there should not be any, I hope I'm preaching to the choir, but, you know, if 10 people who have an RA diagnosis try their best and 8 of them end up needing medication and 2 of them don't, that's not like those 8 failed. That's just like what
No.
their body responded to. It's not your
Right.
fault. Like, I don't feel
No.
guilty at all. I guess but I didn't know until I started sharing my story on social media how many people feel like they're like a failure for
Yes.
taking medicine. And I'm like, what?
Not true at all. It's, oh, you're a failure for being born into the world with black hair, for, being a brunette. Okay, well, I promise you, I had no input into this.
Or
Into the
glasses,
right.
it's, well, I just need glasses.
I
I
just
just
need
need my
glasses.
meds. And I think with children, it is, more emotionally loaded potentially because you're like, oh, you're making a decision. The parent has the decision-making power in some
Mhm.
ways for their child. And then you're like feeling guilty. Do I need this medication or whatnot? But
And sometimes it is hard to have to explain that to a parent that your child needs this medication. But at the end of the day, it's like I'm laying out all the cards for you. This is what I'm seeing. This is what your labs are showing. This is what could happen. This is the badness that can happen if we don't treat it. So we need to fall on some middle ground here. And I think it helps that I have been on these medications myself. So you can't say,
yes,
well, you haven't had to make this decision or it's poison. No, I'm on it. And this is what helps me to show up in front of you today. Like otherwise I'd be sitting in bed in pain.
right. It is so important to share like success stories in like a real down to earth way. Like, I know a lot of people see those commercials. They're like, thanks to this medication, I'm running through a field of sunflowers, and it feels fake.
Right.
Actually, like literally, like I'll post a video of myself swing dancing like on a good day, and I'm like, no, these medications did enable me to do that. Given at least the objective and subjective markers at my diagnosis in 2003, my doctor was like, yeah, without these meds, we
Yeah.
would have expected you to be in a wheelchair within 2 years. Like, it was
Yeah.
that bad. And now here I am 22 years later, so again, I know there's so much fear around the medicine, and they do legitimately have potential side effects for people, which you should consider. But I
It's a
remember the disease has effects too, if not
correct.
controlled.
It's a risk benefit ratio, right? So the risk of using it has to be lower than the benefit of what you're going to get out of it. And part of that
Yes.
equation of balancing it is figuring out, okay, well, what if we don't treat? What would be the risks? You don't want to know what those risks, like we just said, like ongoing inflammation, also increases your risk for heart disease. We don't want to add to that fire. So this
Yeah.
is part of the process of having to decrease that risk.
And it's very complicated for each individual. I feel like I got a little bit further from the topic of, I wanted to highlight a couple other things from your course.
Oh,
And
sure.
one of the bullet points I thought was really great how you worded it was navigating. One of the things you cover is navigating your anti-inflammatory kitchen from
Yeah.
stocking up to dining out. So I think that listeners might want to hear,
Oh, great. This
what
is
are
hard.
some of the things in your kitchen? What are some things that you recommend others have? Yeah.
So for me, because my arthritis is in my hands and my wrists, so I like to keep everything kind of where I don't need to go digging. I don't need to reach up high. I don't need to go down low to be like, where did I put the crock pot? So most everything is in high, like eyesight, or like maybe a little bit above it on a counter. So that in itself helps. If I know I'm going to be like chopping, cutting, or like meal prepping, if I can, I'll buy it pre-chopped. That's my number one hack.
Yeah, me
If
too.
I
Yeah.
can't, because it's like too expensive or it's going to go bad, there's too much of it that they sell, then I will put on my gloves. Like I have special gloves that I use to actually lift weights, and then use that to kind of cut and chop up stuff. So I have to be very strategic in not only like where stuff is placed in the kitchen, but also how intense is it. Chopping carrots is different than chopping cucumbers.
Yeah,
So for the
the
carrots, I'm going to
resistance.
be using
Yeah.
gloves. Obviously, there's lots of assisted devices on Amazon galore. I know you are all about that.
Yeah.
So anything that will make your life easier, put it out, have it in front of you right there. If I'm using like a lot of water, I'll tell my husband to like fill up a pot of water and put it right next to the stove. So then if I can just dump from there, grab a glass, dip it in there and put it into the pot. So I'm not going back and forth, filling up a heavy pan and,
Yeah.
doing that whole thing. So things that reduce weight off my hand, I enlist everyone. This is where kids can help as well. Devices help,
Yes.
placement helps, planning helps, all these things. Yes, it is work. But the flip side is if you don't want to do any of the work, then you're either eating out or going out to eat. And then we're left to our own devices in terms of making a decision.
Yeah.
When you don't plan things, you're probably not going to make the best decision for food. And so I have to deliberately plan my meals and where things are in the kitchen, who I need help from. I mean, sometimes it's not perfect, obviously, but whatever I can do to control the unknowns, I control.
I love that. Yeah. Music to my ears as an OT. And another bullet point, last one I'll highlight, but is the 15 best foods, spices, and beverages to fight RA pain. So what are some of those? I don't want you to give away the whole course now, but what are some of the ones that you most enjoy or that you find that you're...
What I outline in the course is kind of taken from what I learned in my integrative medicine fellowship on what helps, what at least has some data, even if it's not robust, where someone has thought about this, looked at it, tested it, and saying, hey, maybe it affects inflammatory outcomes. So what I mean by that is someone has eaten these foods and tested to see, does it increase your cytokines or inflammatory markers? So we know those are the culprits that cause kind of inflammation. And if it has some data, I know it's not going to be the best data because, again, we'd all be eating the same foods. But those are the ones that I tend to put on the list because I know at least there's evidence backing it. Things like antioxidant-rich foods, your strawberries, your family of berries in general are wonderful to fight inflammation. We need antioxidants to kind of clean up damaged DNA, basically, those cells, because those cells, when they're damaged, create free radicals that can go on to kind of create a ripple effect of inflammation. So that helps kind of bind those free radicals. So blueberries, I'm sure you've heard, are great.
That's one of my favorites. I have gastroparesis and history of SIBO. So I have certain of the berries I tend to avoid their irritants, but blueberries, my stomach is awesome. Yeah,
and it's full of fiber. It's great. Like the more colorful a fruit is, the more rich it's going to be in antioxidants that are good for it, right? Those are called the phytochemicals, or the chemicals that come from plants that are helpful for us. So that's the berries family is great. I also put herbs and drinks in there because a lot of times we fixate on food, but we forget about the ingredients of cooking, like ginger, garlic, all those things are so good. A lot of times, and I come from like a South Asian background where it was very heavy in turmeric, ginger, garlic. So a lot of the curries are so good for you. And also drinks. So when we're thinking about drinks, what are some of water is number one, right? That's not on my 15 list, by the way. But like obviously hydration. But if you can do like green tea, and if you can't handle the caffeinated part, then there's non-caffeinated forms of it as well. But there's components in these foods that have been shown to help decrease inflammation. So when I say decrease inflammation, probably not enough for you to get off your medication or not have to be on a medication, but enough for you to be able to kind of decrease that fire of inflammation. And obviously the bigger thing is the long-term risk that comes with having ongoing inflammation or too much cholesterol, things that we know are directly related to food, diabetes, metabolic disorders. That's what we want to decrease the risk of.
Yeah. And I think, for me, I'm not one that's interested in making like super elaborate meals all the time. I do have a huge sweet tooth, so I like to bake. I like to bake cupcakes or cakes and stuff like for people's birthdays. But for daily eating, like more healthy eating, helpful eating, I love smoothies. It's just such a fast way to get some of the stuff. You can grate some fresh ginger into a smoothie. Throw the blueberries in there, throw some spinach in there.
Chia seeds, flax seeds, all these things help fight inflammation. I know constipation too with the flax seeds. We need fiber. So that smoothie is a great way. Not only is it easy, but my blender is like an eyesight in my kitchen. Like it's right there. Yeah. So I don't have to go grabbing it. But also it's helpful for like gastric motility if you have issues, right, with constipation. But it's also easy on the go. Like you just put it in your car, or you don't need to sit there and eat breakfast before heading off to work for those that need to get to work at an early time. It's just easier to do that. So smoothies might not always hit everybody, but if you can do it even once a week, twice a week, and you can put protein powder in there. There's great plant-based proteins. There's whey-based proteins, add a little bit of flavor. But the other thing is when you have RA, you need to realize that your protein intake matters, especially after you hit a certain age, because that strength, muscle is what anchors the bone and the tendons. So you want to, we talk about like building muscle like biceps, but also the large muscle groups like your core, your back, your quads. We want to focus on that. And in order to maintain/grow it, you do need a certain amount of protein. So I kind of go into that in the course as well.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to the episode and we had a kinesiologist on, and I knew people with rheumatoid arthritis are more prone to like muscle wasting, but I didn't know it was so severe she said it was you are 16 times more likely to have muscle wasting if you
Yeah.
have rheumatoid arthritis, which ever since she
Yes.
said that, it's,
It's eye-opening, right?
yeah, you have to come, in my case, I've been combining strength training with eating protein. You have to, yeah, you have to actually, you can't just eat the protein. It doesn't like, as far as I know, it doesn't just like magically turn into
No.
muscle when you,
No.
when you eat it. That would be
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, right. That we'd all be eating it. There is actually there's a specific mechanism when you have too much inflammation where you have faster degradation of the muscle and slow muscle building process. So it's like you're losing than you are building. That process is happening faster. And so you have to be mindful of that. Yes, you need to control the big game inflammation, right? But then also from a microscopic level, you need to give the body what it needs to be able to build the muscle and give it the
Yeah.
nutrients. So you have to focus on what you're eating.
Yeah. This has been so great. Was there anything else that we didn't touch on that you wanted to
Mm,
share?
No, I just think that if you are confused about food, with most of us are, even me, when I was first diagnosed, it's like this is more of, it has a very strong educational component to the course, but also practical component with recipes, symptom tracking, one-on-one questions with the RD, with the dietitian, specifically one who deals with autoimmune conditions, like women with autoimmune conditions. So I think if you're looking for more info, check it out. I hope it helps. So you're not confused every time you go on Instagram or TikTok.
Yes. And I mean, yeah, I can't emphasize enough the importance of not overgeneralizing from anecdotes, because
Mhm.
someone else's experience may not apply to yours at all. They may have
No.
it, especially if if they got their disease caught early, like you said, with low inflammation markers and low, like, other, objective
Disease
signs.
activity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then that's not going to be the same prognosis as you. So
Mm.
yeah. Yeah. And I just, for people listening, I get approached all the time by people who want to come on the podcast and talk about like their program that's guaranteed to make people never
Mhm.
have pain again. And like, I only have people on the podcast that I know are legit evidence-based. In your case, you obviously get it from the inside out because you're a patient
Yeah.
and a rheumatologist,
Yeah.
clinical rheumatologist, integrative rheumatologist. So it's so great to be able to chat. I
Yeah.
cannot believe it's been 3 years.
I know. And now I have a better idea of what people are asking for now. And,
Yes.
what are the things sitting on people's minds? And diet is number one. It's like
It is.
right up there. It's right up there. There's a lot of confusion. Obviously, we make that decision day to day. And some people might say, oh, diet has nothing to do with your disease course. And I don't think that's true either, because there's a lot of comorbidities, like I mentioned, the heart disease factor that sits with RA. So all of it needs to be addressed. Maybe in not one visit, but certainly over the lifespan of someone with RA, these things need to be addressed.
Right. I think, yeah, just because people make outsized claims about diet, that doesn't mean that diet has no
No.
impact on anything. I think
No.
we made years ago, actually, I should link to this too. I wanted to try to find a way to visualize the fact that different lifestyle variables and integrative approaches move the needle stronger for certain people. For me, the dietary changes, I think because I have such strong other comorbidities like the gastroparesis, it's been harder for me to make those direct links between my subjective like symptoms, or even I don't feel a lot of moving of the needle of my symptoms when I make dietary changes. However, I feel a lot of improvement. I make dietary changes because they're good for me overall. They're good for my other conditions, and they're good for mitigating the risk of heart disease and stuff like that. And in my body, things like sleep and exercise and stress management really have moved the needle more. So
Yes.
knowing that, it's not an all or nothing,
No,
one or the other.
it's not all or nothing. And a lot of it is you doing the weightlifting, and a lot of it is the medicine doing the weightlifting. It's just the ratio for everybody's going to be different. That's all.
Yes. Yeah. So I'll put those pie charts, the pie
That's what it
charts.
was, our pie
Yeah.
charts.
Well, thank you so much. Last
Yeah.
question, if you have time. I
Yeah.
always like to ask people this question. I think it might be interesting to see your answer now compared to 3 years ago, but it's probably similar. But what does it mean to you to live a good life and thrive with rheumatoid arthritis?
Oh, that is good. I don't know what I said 3 years
That's
ago.
like a what is the meaning of life kind of question.
I would say for anyone newly diagnosed or even gone through the journey, I think this is going to be marathon and not a sprint, along those lines, that thought process. Because so many times I've thought, oh my gosh, this is the medicine. This is it. This is going to fix everything for me. And then you realize, shoot, it wasn't, or man, I need to adjust this, or I need to not eat that because I feel a certain way. And so that newness of that learning curve is going to pop up from time to time. And it's easy to feel like, ugh, I thought I had it figured out. Now we're back to square one. But it's part of the game. It's part of the game. It's part of, we're all creatures of habit. We don't like change, but be cognitively flexible to know that like you might have to tweak different parts of your life at different times.
I love that. And it looks like I'm looking very quickly at the transcript, and I don't think I asked that. I started asking that question at the end of the episodes, but I don't think I asked it back then. So yeah, I'm looking at this.
So we'll never know. I don't know if I would
know.
have said the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think it sounds like you're living, like I know you did a TED Talk that was really great about, this kind of like idea of, or maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're living incongruently with your RA and you're not fighting it. Like you're not at odds with it,
Yes.
To me, that's like an essential element.
Yes. It's part of you. And so what do you do with any part of you is that you live with it, right? You live with it, you embrace it. And sometimes you hate it, and that's okay. It's part of it. You can't always just love one thing.
Yeah.
And it's, especially when it changes, you have to change in reaction to it as well.
I was reviewing a training I had taken a while ago on like acceptance and commitment therapy, and I made the analogy of the weather. Like we kind of we don't have to like the weather, but we understand that we cannot influence the weather. Like it's just there.
Correct.
It impacts our life, but no amount of doing anything is going to change it. So sometimes that's like the diagnosis is like that. We can influence.
It is.
And then very good. Yeah.
I just had a woman in clinic earlier today who was like, I'm having such a hard time accepting the diagnosis. And I'm like, that's okay. That's part of the process. Is not, if you were to also accept everything on day 1, day 2, I'd be like, oh, okay. There was no grieving of your old self there. Or like you kind of.
That's how I was. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't grieve for a long time. And it still hurt. Like it hurts. Yeah. It hurts whether you do it quickly or whether you do it like delayed by years.
Like remember when I used to go rock climbing? Yeah, that's not going to be my current picture. A weekend, I'm not going to go rock climbing for fun unless someone else is going. They're like forcing me to go. But that's okay. Yeah. That's okay. Like life changes, circumstances changes, and the more you can let go of that control, the better it is.
It's hard, but I agree with you 100%. Oh, and very last question. Where can people find you online?
Oh, okay. I am in a couple of places. I am on Instagram at Room to Grow TX. I'm on TikTok with the same handle, Room to Grow TX. Facebook as well. I think I'm Room to Grow there.
RHEUM.
Correct, not ROOM.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you're interested in the course, hopefully you'll have the link for that as well. Yes. And so, yeah, from an educational standpoint, hopefully that helps. And you're part of a private Facebook group for people who, when they enroll in the course, you get to be part of our community. So you can like bounce ideas off each other. That recipe sucked. That wasn't great. Or I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? So you have a brain trust of people who get it.
That's really nice. I think I'm a big fan of small curated Facebook groups,
right?
Kind of versus the huge ones that are very overwhelming. Even for me as an extrovert, I'm like, this is too much even for me. So yeah, I love it. Yeah, and I always have, for those listening, I always have links on the Arthritis Life website, which is arthritis.theenthusiasticlife.com. That's the long URL, or you can just see a link to it in the show notes or in the initial show notes if you're on like your podcast platform. You can click there, and then we'll also have a link to the video of the conversation and a transcript because I try to make it as accessible as possible. So thank you so much for your time. It's so great to catch up.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll let it be quicker than 3 years next time you come in. All right. Bye for now. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast is supported by Room to Thrive, an educational program I created to help empower you to live life to the fullest with rheumatic disease. In the program, you're going to learn evidence-based tools for managing all the ways rheumatic disease affects your life. And my goal is to help you go from overwhelmed to confident, supported, and connected in a matter of weeks. You can go through the pre-recorded modules on your own in the self-paced course, or you can take the course along with a robust support group. of new arthritis friends to support you and cheerlead you along the way. Learn more in the link in my show notes, or you can always go to www.myarthritislife.net. And if you like this podcast, I'd be so honored if you took the time to rate and review it. I also encourage you to share it with anyone you know who might benefit from it. I also want to remind you that you can find full transcripts, videos, and detailed show notes with hyperlinks for each episode on the Arthritis Life website, plus full episode videos on the Arthritis Life YouTube channel. If you have any ideas for content for future episodes, or you want to share your story on the podcast, please send me, Cheryl, an email at info@myarthritislife.net. I can't wait to hear from you, and thanks so much again for your time.